So the title of the message this morning is Tough to Love. And we're going to, we'll see where the Spirit moves us, but the plan is to cover a few different areas from basketball to our reading from Genesis to the gospel lesson and some real reflection on love and what it means to us. And I might even weave in a little bit of connection to some of the work that I've done over the years. But to start off, one of the things that was not included in my bio was that I've done quite a bit of coaching over the years. Have 3 kids, all of whom played sports. My sons, I've coached in basketball quite a bit. My daughter, the only opportunity I had to coach her was she tried soccer out when she was in kindergarten. It was mostly practices. One game at the end of the season, we got in the car, and she said, "Okay, I'm done with that." And that was her one season of soccer. Later returned to some other sports. But with my sons, I got a chance to coach basketball quite a bit and watch them move up and then out of playing basketball on a team. And had a real wonderful opportunity a few years later when my son's best friend got the opportunity to be the head coach at the Lamoille Union Middle School team and asked me to be his assistant coach, which was a real joy and pleasure. And gave me a chance to return to a sport that I really enjoyed, but more importantly, an opportunity to connect with young people. And sports, as with many things, art and other activities, give kids a chance to push themselves a little bit, maybe explore something new, try something different, maybe struggle a little bit, maybe find some hidden talents, and then be able to enjoy those in other parts of their lives. So I always enjoyed basketball, but really for me, the focus was about, connection and working with others on a team. And I had a lot of fun, got to coach some teams that struggled a bit, also got to coach some teams that really did well and had quite a few wins. But Evan Slayton, the head coach, and I, we would check in quite a bit, kind of talk about how things were going, and one of the things that we would, sometimes, reflect on are players that maybe were struggling a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out what support they might need, maybe work with the athletic director. But we ended up talking about how some of the players were tough to love, and that would come from, experiences where players, struggled to get along with other players. Maybe we're provoking each other a little bit, distracting each other, or really coming down on a player. Some of their teammates missed a shot, and folks getting upset and giving that player some grief. And so, this idea that sometimes it can be tough to love someone. We want to hold to that ideal of loving others, but sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge, a bit of a struggle. The story from Genesis this morning about Joseph also gives us an opportunity to explore a situation where it may have been tough to share some love. So the part of the story that we catch today in the reading from Genesis is what you might call the reconciliation and the healing and the coming together. But the backstory is that Joseph's brothers had sold him as a slave. And that's how Joseph ended up in Egypt. And that sounds, pretty shocking, horrific. But their intention initially was actually to kill him. He was the youngest brother, was in favor with his father, but had these dreams. And these dreams were interpreted, and he interpreted, and his brothers and others interpreted, were about his greatness. And that Joseph was going to essentially have his brothers bowing down to him. And the brothers weren't down with this. And so at one point devised a plan, and we're going to kill Joseph. But Reuben, one of the other brothers, advocated, said, no, we can't kill our brother. And so instead threw him in what's sometimes described as a hole or a well. And then eventually he was sold as a slave and ends up in Egypt. And these same dreams continue, but are prophecies of what's to come in Egypt. And so Joseph is moved up into this position of power. And so his brothers are returning to Egypt, a place that had the kinds of things of food and grains that their family needed. And so the brothers come back and realize here's their brother who they assumed was dead or certainly not going to be in this position of power. And so Joseph was seen by his brothers, we could say, as someone who was tough to love. But pretty powerful, the response that we see in this healing opportunity that Joseph provides. Tears are shed and he embraces his brothers. But also, we hear in his speech concern about the well-being of his family and the well-being of others, knowing that this famine is coming, and a concern about people having food and maybe people coming into poverty. So quite a bit to hold there for Joseph in that transition from being thrown in a well to then being in a position to help his brothers and his family. So that brings us to our reading from the gospel today, and some words that, I'll admit I've read through quite a few times, but at times I sort of struggled to really connect with. These are some pretty intense concepts here. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. And then these next actions. If someone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone, not some people, everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes your goods, do not ask for them again. It's quite a tall order to fill there that Jesus is asking of us. And we've heard in other settings talking about loving your neighbors, but in this instance Jesus is asking us to love our enemies. Quite an extreme request. And I think Jesus, in his gentle ways, really sought to push those with whom he is speaking and meeting with. And I think also seeks to push and really encourage us. And why do we need that? Why would Jesus go to the length with some of these requests? I think it's because he knows human beings pretty well. And he knows that at times we can get comfortable. We can enjoy those blessings that we've received and get very attached. This reading had me thinking a lot about attachment, because what we're being asked is to let go, to detach from these things that we might really enjoy. And I think Jesus also knew that, so because of that attachment, that a simple request might get overlooked by us. And so again, really was pushing it. Reminded me, was mentioned earlier that I worked for quite a few years at a place called Laraway Youth and Family Services. I was there for about 20 years. It was really amazing work, supporting young people who faced some really significant challenges in their lives. Either getting kicked out of their school, being removed from the custody of their parents, and being placed either in a foster home or residential care program. So really, really challenging work. And as I continued to work there, it became clear it was really important to raise awareness for the staff who worked there about taking care of themselves, and that there really needed to be a balance. To be there to support a young person who's really struggling, to help de-escalate a crisis, really requires that you as an individual, Zach Key, one of our staff, would talk about being a solid object for someone who maybe is feeling disconnected and in a little bit of a chaotic place. So I would often talk to staff at staff meetings. We would do trainings and bring folks together. And so I would preach quite a bit about wellness, taking care of yourselves, We even had a wellness framework that identified all these different areas of looking at the benefits that were available, your recreation interests, supervision model. It's a pretty comprehensive plan, pretty impressive. What I found, though, as I had continued on, was getting close to the end of my time at Laraway, is while I could talk to others and encourage others to take care of themselves, I wasn't doing as much as I could to take care of myself. It was a luxury I believed I couldn't afford. So I was doing a lot of work, a lot of support for my kids, involved in the community, but I knew I was maybe pushing it a little bit too much in terms of what I was trying to do. And through what I like to call a bizarre lawnmower riding accident, I snapped the patellar tendon on my knee. Fell to the ground. I basically saw my kneecap up in my thigh and thought, well, that's not supposed to be there. And after that thought, my next thought was, thank you. Because I knew in that moment I was hearing messages about taking care of myself, but I wasn't heeding those messages. And that I needed a pretty provocative and extreme message to really get me to slow down and take a look at what it really meant to take care of myself. And I think Jesus, uses these extreme examples in a similar way to really get us to pause, to really take a look at ourselves and the love that we have and what we're doing with it. I really believe, too, that Jesus, when we talk about those who are tough to love, maybe hearing those words already, maybe some people have come up in your mind. Maybe that childhood bully, a kid that you knew, maybe a neighbor that you've struggled with in some different ways. Maybe maybe you're at a store and someone treated you rudely. Sometimes we like to think of different world leaders from the past and say, that would have been really tough to embrace, fill in the blank of a leader. But it can be easy to sort of look outside and around us. But I think Jesus also intended for this discussion to give us a chance to reflect on ourselves. How do we feel about ourselves? Because maybe one of the toughest people to love is the one that's right inside of us. Tough to love. Tough to love. But Jesus certainly talked a lot about love, and when asked, what's the greatest commandment? Well, it was love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and your mind. Then he followed up, but the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself, as you love yourself. So that's part of the answer that Jesus gave to the greatest commandment, was loving ourselves. And as I've been thinking about this, to love others, our neighbors, our family, our friends, and certainly our enemies, is going to require us to really dig deep. It can be exhausting. It might mean physical laboring and support. It might mean prayers and worries and concerns. It might mean some difficult phone calls. So that drawing deep on that well means that we need to make sure that we're filling it up as well. And that can come through the different ways that we love ourselves. And that's something I've noticed in my life sometimes that I struggle with, and I hear others struggling with as well. This idea of loving myself. Loving myself. But when we put it in the context of the role that we can play in taking care of and supporting others, when we see and hear it from Jesus as a part of the commandments that we were given, maybe causes us to pause and reflect and see it as the priority it is. And the beautiful and wonderful thing about loving ourselves is that it can take whatever form or shape makes the most sense to us. The psalm reading for today several times said, do not fret yourself. Do not fret yourself. Be still before the Lord. These are words from thousands of years ago. But do they feel relevant today? Are we fretting in any way with what's going on in the world, in our country, here in our state, our neighborhood, our own household? Do we fret just how we're doing about ourselves? And if the answer is yes, then the psalmist says, be still. The answer and solution wasn't go do more, get busier. Just be still. It was a really beautiful thing to be sitting up here and looking at all of you during the anthem. So it reminded me of being in a meditation class. Saw a lot of peace. And Pastor Dan mentioned in preparing here that you all really appreciate and enjoy those sort of moments of silence. So I'd like to invite you all just to take a moment right now. It can feel sometimes, again, like a luxury to just get the opportunity to pause with all the busyness of our day. So just going to invite you to join. We'll just take a minute or two here for just a really brief meditation. I'll share a few words, but then hold some space for silence. And so I just invite you to get comfortable. And getting comfortable first means just noticing your body. How's your body feeling right now? And if you notice something that's maybe feeling a little uncomfortable, to go ahead and make a little adjustment. I've often been told that our body is our first teacher. So it's always good to heed the lessons and wisdom of our teachers. So I invite you to just find a comfortable space with your body. And eyes closed, eyes open, that's your choice. Again, whatever feels most comfortable. For some people, it's a gaze a few feet ahead of them. For others, it's closing their eyes. So just invite you to close your eyes for just a moment. And in this space to notice, how are you feeling? How is your body doing today? What's been on your mind? And again, we don't have to do anything about those thoughts, except notice that they're there. Sometimes I like to think of and imagine thoughts in my mind as leaves upon a stream that I notice and see, and then just keep moving on. And maybe some more come down the line, but again, we're just going to keep moving on. Maybe notice the sounds and the smells being in this space. And the stillness. And when you're ready, I invite you to come back to this space and this time. Thank you for indulging me and taking a little bit of meditative space. And as you read in the bio, I find myself dining on a spiritual buffet these days and exploring a variety of faith traditions and practices. But one of the most powerful experiences I found is just being still, following those words of the psalmist. Just holding some space for some quiet, stillness, and spirit, and to see where that spirit moves and takes us. So, coming back to the reading from Matthew, and sort of, the purpose and sort of what Jesus points to in terms of this extreme love, this radical compassion that he's calling for in our reading from Luke today. He says that your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Martin Luther King, in a speech that he gave about this text, talked about the value of importance of loving, and not because everyone is likable. And you can imagine that in his life and his experiences, there were some people who were tough to love. But he says because we are called to love others because God loves others. I imagine it might be really difficult to make the case, well, hold on, God, but this is what this person said to me. This is what this person did. And I imagine God listening, nodding, and encouraging us to love that person and reminding us that he loves that person. And also there is a promise embedded in this. And at the end of the reading from Luke, as we read, forgive and you will be forgiven, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. And this refers to a practice within the markets at that time, and people buying and exchanging goods. And as a merchant, you can imagine there may be the temptation to maybe not quite fill that container fully, maybe hold a little bit back. Especially if, this is a person who shortchanged me a little bit last week. But Jesus encourages us to be a merchant who presses down on that amount that is being sold and shaken together to really fill up any empty spaces and make sure it's even running over. And that in that way that we give, the gift of love will be given back to us in a very generous way. So this text today calls for, makes a big request, a challenging request. And invite you to maybe imagine and think about one person. Maybe it's difficult right now to love the whole world. But let's start with one person. And imagining God's love for that person, despite what has been said and what's been done. And also considering what is needed for you to take care of yourself, to be able to extend that love to someone else. And maybe that's some meditation and quiet and sitting in stillness. Or maybe there's some other practices or healing that can be helpful for you and give you the chance to reflect on the love that you have received so that you can share it with others. And it's a wonderful blessing to share with others. And I also want to make sure to express my appreciation. I've been a member of the United Church of Johnson for many years and was moved in some really powerful ways by the generosity of Pastor Dan and members of this congregation to help the United Church of Johnson back in 2023 when the church was flooded, and the support that the church continues to provide. Pastor Dan and Reverend Becca from the church in Morrisville were just meeting with leadership at the United Church of Johnson. So the minister has recently stepped down, and they continue to show up and share their love. And it's a wonderful thing about being in this community. There are incredible opportunities to share your love and to give back. I included some information in the entrance for the church, a flyer and some business cards that give you information about health and human service organizations in our community. And I see some of our different partners in the room here today, Joe and Saudia, people who are doing really important work providing care for people in our community. And it's incredible to see and recognize what they're doing. But even more powerful way of appreciating that work is to join in and to participate. And I'm sure Saudia and Joe both probably have some ideas about volunteer opportunities or donation opportunities as a way to help here in our community. It's a really wonderful thing. Despite living in Burlington, what keeps me coming back to Lamoille is the spirit of connections and folks working together, not just in health and human services, but our faith partners, our libraries, and municipal officers. And for me, I take a look at, I want to, be careful about making assumptions about anyone else and what's motivating their work. But what I feel in that work that I do is love. Love between colleagues and love for those who've maybe struggled in different ways. So encourage folks to take those pauses to reflect, to find those ways to hold space to love yourself, and then to explore how that love might move to love your neighbors, and maybe with at least just one person, loving one of your enemies. Amen.